What is our life? What is space-time? Have you ever wondered what space and time truly are? Do they exist at all? While we perceive space every day, how can we grasp time? And what is the purpose of our existence in this space when linear time will eventually erase us and everyone we have ever loved from the face of the earth? Let's try to make sense of this. The cycle of life is birth and death, with a span of space-time in between. Who created space and time? God? Some higher intelligence? Or perhaps death itself? Death created time to grow things that it would kill. And that is the horror and the very mystery of all life. We are trapped. We're in a terrible dream for which there is no waking up. Rust Cole, True Detective. You might say the Big Bang caused space and time. Space and time emerged after the Big Bang. But what existed before it? Some believe there was no before. The birth of time and space occurred with the expansion of the universe. Scientists also theorize, based on string theory, that there are 10 different dimensions, one of which is time. We are accustomed to time moving in one direction. But what if some of the other dimensions are temporal rather than spatial? Many theories and hypotheses exist among scientists, including the idea that time and space do not truly exist. It is thought that thought itself created everything, including death, and thus time, to cultivate that which it would eventually destroy. Thought gave birth to time. Thought gave birth to space. Do you understand? Without knowledge, we have no space, and there is no time without knowledge. There is no time and no space. Scientists can say what they like, but even they admit that there are no such things as space, time, matter, that they exist only within the space-time continuum. I ask if time and space exist the moment a thought is born. Time also appears. Thought itself gave birth to the concept of eternity. It longs for eternity, but knows that under no circumstances can it bring itself into a state of eternity, because then it would dissolve, cease to exist. Thought invented time in order to perpetuate itself outside the field of time. We are trapped because we keep wanting to get out of this trap. There is no answer to this question. Uppaluri Gopala Krishnamurti. If this is true, everything in life, joy, suffering, success, failure, love, hate, memory, and oblivion is merely a creation of the mind that generates thoughts. We are trapped. But if we are trapped, perhaps it is possible to escape and find answers. At least we can try. For to be lost, one must be found. To be found, one must be lost. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer believed that the world exists as representation, that is, as an object for the subject. Since the subject is inherently subjective, so is the world he perceives, including space and time, which we interpret. Schopenhauer wrote, "Time is mere succession and nothing else. Space is mere position and nothing else. Matter is mere casualty and nothing else." One might conclude with a Buddhist-like affirmation of the world's emptiness. However, any conclusion about the life of a philosopher or a doctrine is ultimately a subjective value judgment. Let's delve further and see how deep the rabbit hole goes. Arthur Schopenhauer's fellow German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche anticipated theories in physics that would begin to emerge decades after his death. Nietzsche's concept of eternal return is now somewhat familiar, especially with the remarkable experiments in quantum physics today. However, in the late 19th century, his theory was both poetic and groundbreaking. For pessimists, this concept embodies the ultimate horror: to feel time slipping away like sand through one's fingers, to be reborn, to suffer, to experience pain repeatedly, punctuated only by fleeting moments of joy and happiness. Isn't that a terrifying thought? Nietzsche himself wrote, "If the universe is indeed infinite, then there are countless copies of our planet. Somewhere right now, the same events are happening, and a copy of you is reading a copy of this note." You might say this is mere speculation from someone who lived over a century ago, but let's not forget the wisdom that Einstein proclaimed. Imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world, stimulating progress, giving birth to evolution. And Einstein was no novice, so perhaps we should heed his words. What happens if we combine Hugh Everett's many worlds interpretation with Nietzsche's theory? Things become even more intriguing. The many worlds interpretation suggests that the universe consists of a quantum superposition of very many, perhaps uncountably infinite, increasingly divergent, non-communicating parallel universes or quantum worlds. What if we live life over and over again, but each time it's different, to varying degrees? In one life, you might be a millionaire watching this video, on a yacht surrounded by models. In another, you're a family person with a mortgage, finding joy in quiet Sunday fishing trips. There are an infinite number of such variations, and this isn't just mere fantasy. Films exploring these concepts are being made today. Be that as it may, space is constantly changing from one life to another. But does the sense of time remain constant? Physicists believe that time is inextricably linked to entropy. The term entropy, derived from the Greek for transformation, was introduced into science by 19th century German physicist Rudolf Clausius. Entropy is the measure of disorder or randomness in a system, representing the tendency of any ordered state to move toward chaos or gradual decay. No one can escape entropy. Our lives begin at conception and continue until our last breath. It is unavoidable. The universe itself expands after the Big Bang, and theory suggests it may eventually contract again. Reflecting on Nietzsche and Hugh Everett, we arrive at the idea that this cycle happens repeatedly, but in different, equally probable realities. Perhaps this is driven by the passage of time as dictated by entropy. It is inevitable for all processes, yet it is not entirely objective. Entropy can manifest in relationships. Some marriages last for decades, while others end in divorce after a few months. The entropy of health varies as well. Some people may decline after half a century, while others in their 90s are still tending to their gardens. If entropy is relative, then it must be relative to time. As we will discuss later, the definition of concepts changes from era to era, from individual to individual, and with each new discovery. For instance, the English scientist Isaac Newton described time as a uniform flow, also known as duration. This notion of absolute uniformity was challenged by Albert Einstein when he introduced the theory of relativity. Einstein's theory of relativity demonstrates that time is relative. For example, when you've engaged in your favorite activity, it seems to fly by quickly, but when you return to work on Monday after a pleasant weekend, time can feel stretched. Essentially, even without delving into numerous physical experiments, we can see that time, like distance, is relative because it depends on the motion of bodies. The greater the speed of an object, the slower time passes for it. However, this effect is only significant at speeds approaching the speed of light. The everyday example of a person running, experiencing time differently than someone walking slowly on a promenade, is negligible in relativistic terms. Howard Lovecraft once wrote, "Time is motionless and has neither beginning nor end." The idea of time as something that moves and causes change is an illusion. Time itself is in fact an illusion. If time has relative structure, as Einstein showed, can we assert the illusory nature of time? It is quite possible, for perhaps only in our universe does time appear to move linearly forward. However, as we've discovered, our universe, like our lives, is just one of indefinitely possible variants of existence. There may be other universes, other worlds, where time does not exist at all. There are other perspectives as well. From the point of view of a photon, time does not exist. From the moment it is emitted, it can travel for billions of years in human terms, but for the proton itself, there is no time between its emission and absorption. For the photon, time stands still, and without time, there is no distance, that is, no space. But let's leave photons and other universes aside and return to our world. Our world is shaped by belief. What a person believes becomes their reality, even if it's belief in an invisible entity beyond Earth. Depending on what you believe, you will perceive the world differently. For example, love is an all-encompassing feeling, but it varies from person to person. For a biologist, love is a complex interplay of hormones and neurotransmitters. For a poet, it's a song of joy and suffering. Physicists might visualize love as a bond between two particles of light. A Buddhist might simply say that love is emptiness. like the entire world. Therefore, just like love, it is impossible to provide a definitive definition of time. Everything depends on one's perspective, the angle from which you view a phenomenon, and the lens through which you interpret it. Time is a mirage that has no constant value, similar to how love is perceived by a physicist, because particles can be temporary or stable. Definitions change from era to era, from person to person, and with each new discovery. Plato saw time as a moving image of eternity. The philosopher Augustine of Hippo understood time as a subjective phenomenon, seeing it as a stretching of the soul. The German philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm developed an already subjective understanding of time. For Schopenhauer, as we have discovered, time is nothing more than a sequence. Love also follows this sequence, the approaching and distancing of individuals over time. So, are time and love connected? You could say so. Their connection can give birth to what we call art. Whatever time is, illusory or real, eternal or finite, for us it moves, and sometimes it moves us, touching our hearts through works of art. Generally, there is a sense that art has only one purpose: to remind us that we are human beings, not animals. Humans who possess the tragic realization that time is passing, that there was birth and there will be death. But what if this is just an illusion, a side effect of evolved consciousness? In fact, we are eternally in the present, and time, if it moves, is illusory. The present is the only thing that has no end, said Edwin Schrödinger. But still, for us, time moves, albeit subjectively, and the further time moves, the faster its steps seem to be. Approximately 300 years ago, a man was born, and a horse-drawn carriage stood outside his window. After he died, it continued to stand. Now, time has accelerated so much that those born at the end of the 20th century were born into a world and will die in another. This is what happened to Arthur Morgan, the protagonist of the game Red Dead Redemption 2. It's a game about the story of a gang, led by Dutch van der Linde, who were not ready for the real world. But it is also a story about today, the coming world revolution, a shift in the world order, including one related to the increasing development of artificial intelligence, will plunge many people into the same conditions. Just as in the Wild West, where bounty hunters and freedom-loving romantics found themselves out of business, in our time, those who cling to the present will have to adapt to a reality increasingly replaced by artificial constructs, be it food, intelligence, love, or even reality itself. Many professions will no longer need people, and human decisions and actions will be replaced by harsh and dry algorithms. It will be time to die. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain. Time to die. Roy Blatty, Blade Runner, 1982. But before you die, you have to live a life. How much time does a person have? And can a person influence the length of their time? Or is the allotted time predetermined? Before answering this question, it is worth recalling Hugh Everett's many worlds interpretation. The American physicist believed that although we only see one of the realities, the others also have a separate physical existence. Until the moment we decide which reality to choose for ourselves, we are actually in a superposition, although we cannot realize it. At a certain point, however, we find ourselves after the choice has been made. Until we make a choice, we are akin to Schrödinger's cat, both alive and dead simultaneously. Suppose you must decide whom to marry, a blonde or a brunette. By selecting the brunette, you enter a fixed reality where she is your spouse. But what becomes of the hypothetical reality where you married the blonde? Did it vanish? Did it not exist? Hugh Everett would disagree. Up to the moment of decision, his theory posits that we occupy multiple states at once. When the choice is made, we perceive ourselves in only one state, but that's merely our perception. According to Everett, we continue to exist in both realities simultaneously. Now, it depends on the observer. This isn't esoteric or fantastical, it's a phenomenon rooted in quantum mechanics. The Copenhagen interpretation suggests that the behavior of atomic particles cannot be precisely defined without considering their interaction with measuring instruments that determine the conditions of the phenomena. In essence, reality cannot be sharply separated from those who observes it, when and how. Once a choice is made, the observer becomes part of the quantum system and splits into multiple states. In one reality, he believes he is married to the blonde. In another, he believes he is with the brunette. According to the many worlds interpretation, there are infinite versions of reality. Perhaps each new reality is born at the moment we make a choice. After the decision, reality bifurcates. We find ourselves in the one we have selected because we observe it. Yet simultaneously, another reality exists, the one we could have chosen but did not, and we have no way to observe it. Fascinating, isn't it? This illustrates how we influence our lives, extending or shortening our allotted time through constant choices. Gym or bar, be honest or deceive, vote or stay home. However, we cannot foresee the consequences of our decisions because we cannot see the future. But wait, what if we could glimpse the future? And it's not magic, it's biology. Let's first revisit Nietzsche's theory of eternal return, combined with Hugh Everett's many worlds interpretation. Based on these ideas, we are born and die repeatedly, without memories of past lives or knowledge of future ones. It's as if reality itself insists there is nothing beyond this life, even if it appears otherwise. Applying this concept to a single life, it means there is no yesterday or tomorrow, only the present. When we embrace the now, we can fully appreciate the aesthetics and beauty of time and potentially alter our destinies within our allotted time by seizing control of the present moment. Is this achievable? Many geneticists and neurophysiologists might argue otherwise. They may concede it's theoretically possible, but assert that we cannot influence it. We cannot take time into our own hands. We are merely biological puppets, ensnared in determinism. Arthur Schopenhauer wrote, "Everything lives but for a moment, and hurries towards death. Plants and insects perish in summer. Animals and humans exist briefly. Death mows relentlessly. And yet, as if the world's fate were different, at every moment everything is in its place. Everything exists, as if nothing has died and is not dying. This immortality is time. Thanks to it, despite millennia of death and decay, nothing has yet perished, not a single atom of matter, and still less, not a single fraction of that inner essence which is nature to us. Therefore, at every moment, we can joyfully exclaim, in spite of time, death, and decay, we still live together." There are probably many people who think that our world is deteriorating. Wars, epidemics, and degradation are increasingly enveloping the earth. But it's important to realize that this is the law of time. Each species, upon reaching its peak, declines and then disappears or transforms into another. It will be the same with humankind. Humanity will either disappear from the face of the earth as a biological species or transform into another. For example, at one time, Homo erectus was displaced by Homo neanderthalensis, who in turn were assimilated by Homo sapiens, our species. So what will happen to Homo sapiens in the future? Will we also be assimilated? Or will we completely disappear from the face of the earth? But if we disappear, who will take our place? Quite possibly artificial intelligence, which may gain a dominant role on Earth and will try to solve all the issues that humanity has caused during its not always reasonable existence. But what will happen to time? Most likely, time will not disappear, not even if the human race does. For no matter how much of a god man imagines himself to be, he has no power over time. He is not even in control of his destiny or the circumstances that befall him in a given period. Everything that happens in life, the destiny of all humankind, is but one of the accidents that have occurred in a given period upon our burden. In the end, everything is in vain, except this moment, which we have no power to change. All we can do is accept it. David Hawkins, an American scientist and philosopher, wrote, "The potential source of happiness is actually within. There is no time or place for happiness other than the present moment. The true source of joy and happiness is the realization of one's existence in the present moment. The source of pleasure is always within, even if it is due to external events or acquisitions. A problem itself cannot exist in any moment in time. Unhappiness arises from withdrawing from the reality of the now and creating a story from the past or future, which have no reality because they do not exist." On the scale of the cosmos, the existence of humanity, as well as all the planets in the solar system, is not just very small, but almost reduced to nothingness. If the entire cycle of the history of the universe could be placed on a clock, the time of our total duration would be less than half a second. We are so small and insignificant on the scale of space. And just as human life has no inherent meaning, space has no objective time. It is infinite and inseparable from the present, creating the illusion of movement so that life happens, so that people, worrying about the future, develop and improve life, so that scientists, based on the past, dismantle some theories and create others, so that poets interpret the past in different ways, fostering reflection and feeding on feelings. Since the past has no objective picture, memories are only fantasies that can transform over time. But all these time periods for life must exist, as life itself does. Not because they make global sense, but because that's how atoms came together. That's how the universe was formed, and that's how this narrative ends. But the narrative didn't end because time is a flat circle, and we are indeed trapped. But life is how you approach it, not what happens in it. Thank you to everyone who is active and stays on the channel. Thank you all for your comments and constructive criticism.